Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we're discussing Game 28 of the regular season between the San Jose Sharks and the Vegas Golden Knights, in which the Sharks have lost 5-4 in the shootout. And this game is a testament to how far the Sharks have come in such a short period of time thus far this season, because this is not the first matchup between these two teams this year. In fact, it is the third time these two teams have faced off against each other. The first of which was in Game 1 of the regular season. The Sharks had some okay moments in that game, but at the end of the day were just heavily outmatched and lost it 4-1. In their second matchup, the Sharks were quite heavily outmatched, quite heavily outplayed, and never really had much of a chance, and ended up losing it 5-0. Here in this third matchup, not only are the Sharks very competitive and skate very well with the Golden Knights, but you could even make the argument they were the better team on the night. It's not by a significant margin, it is indeed by just a couple of inches here or there, and you could even make the argument the Golden Knights were better, but the fact is that this was very, very evenly played. In fact, the Sharks actually outshot the Golden Knights by a decent margin, and it is only the shootout, which is barely even, like, it's sort of more hockey adjacent as much as it is actually hockey. It is only the shootout that ends up taking the Sharks out in this game, as it was the third straight time in which the Sharks, in the third period, trailing by a couple of goals, this time just 2 instead of the usual 3 or even 4. This is the third straight game where the Sharks managed to make a comeback, get an empty net goal or an extra attacker goal to force an overtime. And so this team that just a month ago you would think that even a single goal deficit, like a 1-0 deficit early in the first period, you would immediately sort of pack that game away and say, all right, let's move on to the next one because the Sharks aren't coming back. Now suddenly, even if there's just 5 minutes left in the third and the Sharks are trailing by a couple of goals, you actually have in the back of your mind, like, hey, this team can actually make a comeback. 3 straight games with a 6-on-5 goal in that situation. It is extremely impressive. But let us go on to how this game went down. It was Mario Ferraro getting the scoring started very early on, just about 30 seconds into the game, as the Sharks will finally get another goal from a defenseman this season, Ferraro's first of the year, and that would be the only goal of the first period. The Sharks would play a pretty solid opening frame, kind of like how they did against Detroit, but this time they were rewarded with a goal. The second period is where the Golden Knights would wake up and would show indeed why they are the defending Stanley Cup champions, as they would not only tie this game with a goal from Marchessault, but take the lead with a power play goal from Chandler Stevenson to make it 2-1 Vegas. In the third period, the Golden Knights would then make it 3-1 relatively early on, before Hoffman would get a pretty lucky bounce to tie it up on a power play, or to bring it to within 1 on a power play 3-2, and then Marchessault would make it 4-2. And as the minutes would run down, you were thinking, oh, is the Sharks' magic gone? But it was not. Calen Addison, with just a few minutes left, brings the game back to within 1 once more, and it is not Hertl again, but it is Hoffman who gets an opportunity in the 6-on-5 situation to tie this game, does so with his second of the night, and indeed forces that overtime. The overtime wasn't super exciting, not a ton of chances, maybe like 1 or 2, and so the 5-minute pass, and we head to the shootout, and like I said, the Sharks have struggled with the shootout thus far this season. It's not exactly the style of hockey that the Sharks excel in, because of the fact that they aren't necessarily the most skilled team, and especially when you take a look at tonight, where we know they're already missing Logan Couture and have been the entire season, but Eklund didn't end up dressing for tonight's game, and Duclair got injured halfway through. They are really missing a lot of skill up front to be able to take these shootout shots, and so they go all 3 missing. The Golden Knights manage to get a goal, and that's basically all it takes. Moving on to the players to talk about, we have the top line. Like I mentioned, Eklund not dressing here tonight, did take the warm-ups, but it felt as though he was a bit under the weather for that situation, so best to keep him out. No reason to risk your star young player in a random regular season game, and so it is Labanc filling in on the top line, and I definitely was relatively excited to see this. Labanc has been quite good in his third line role in each of the past few games, and there really weren't many better options to actually put on this first line, considering you don't want to break up the second line of Zetterlund, Granlund, and Duclair. And so LeBlanc jumps up here, and it is quite obvious that it's not going to go nearly as well as it did with Eklund. Eklund is a better player than LeBlanc, and on top of that, those three players had been playing together for a few games, so they were beginning to build that chemistry. Tossing LeBlanc in there, even though he is sort of a long-time Sharks, or at least a longer-term Shark player than everybody else on the team, or most everybody else on the team, it's still not really any great chemistry here. So this felt like a moment for both Hertl and Barabanov, a more recognizable duo together, to actually step up and carry the brunt of this first line. And I don't really think that actually ended up happening here tonight. Barabanov, who I have constantly be sort of giving the benefit of the doubt in these past few games, talking about how he's been getting better, he's still yet to reach that level where you're actually satisfied with his performance game in and game out. It's like, it's okay, it's decent enough, it's serviceable, but you're also very familiar with what Barabanov is actually capable to do when he is playing at his highest level, and he's very clearly not anywhere near that. And it feels as though he's maybe not even super engaged into each of these games. We saw late in the first period a 2-on-1 between LeBlanc and Barabanov. Barabanov feeds to Kevin LeBlanc, and LeBlanc, perhaps he should take the shot there, but he actually ends up getting the pass back to Barabanov, and Barabanov is so not ready for this pass that he doesn't even have a stick on the ice in that situation. You know, he's not going to be the first player who is surprised to get a pass back in a 2-on-1 situation, but usually the sort of number one lesson that coaches teach players, even from like a very young age, is to keep your stick on the ice, and Barabanov can't even follow that very fundamental rule of hockey, and so it doesn't end up amounting to a goal, which could have put the Sharks ahead 2-0 heading into that first intermission. And so it's just been the general small bumps and bruises for Barabanov. While he has shined in like 6-on-5 type of situations when there's more room to work with, the 5-on-5 he has been relatively nullified. When it comes to Tomas Hertl, he has been very good in each of these past couple of games, getting those 6-on-5 game-tying goals, and he had a beautiful pass that led to the Mike Hoffman game-tying goal in this one. But like with Barabanov, at even strength, Hertl didn't really get to do much. Perhaps it is missing William Eklund. Perhaps this was just a tougher matchup because, of course, the Golden Knights are a significantly better team than the Sharks have faced in these past couple of games, compared to, no offense, Detroit and the New York Islanders, just with how fantastic the Golden Knights are as a squad. So it was always going to be harder for Hertl, and he definitely struggled at times here in this game. It was an average game in general for the first line, just not really reaching any high highs. When it comes to the second line, we have Granlund and Zetterlund, and of course Anthony Duclair. I already mentioned Duclair left this game about halfway through with an injury, did not come back. Hopefully that's not too long term, because like I mentioned, this second line has had very good chemistry together over these past couple of weeks, and David Quinn would not want to have to break them up unless he had to, and of course an injury would be exactly that reason for having to break them up. When it comes to the two other players on this line, Granlund continues to just rack up the points, adds another 2 assists here tonight, continues to just do a lot of very good things on the offensive zone, continues to be a solid player when it comes on the power play as well in the 6-on-5 situation, working up at the blue line, sort of being that flex type of defenseman style of player that he tried to fit earlier on in the season and it didn't really work out. And he's right now playing as one of the best forwards for the San Jose Sharks, maybe only one small step behind Tomas Hertl, and you could perhaps even make the argument at the very least points-wise that he's maybe a small step above Hertl over these past couple of weeks. When it comes to Zetterlund, he's the type of player who's never going to necessarily dominate a game. You're not usually going to end a 60-minute NHL game and think, wow, Zetterlund was by far the best player on the ice for the San Jose Sharks, like you might with a Tomas Hertl, or perhaps even an outside shot for like a William Eklund, a Mikael Granlund, Alexander Barabanov. When it comes to Zetterlund, he does a lot of the right things. He works very hard. He gets his chances. He gets his shots off, and he fits in well on this second line for sure. It's just not exactly that very high ceiling as a player. He's the type of player who you absolutely love to have on a winning squad. I can imagine Zetterlund fitting really well on even like a Stanley Cup winning team on like a second or third line middle six second power play unit. Here with San Jose, he gets an even more expanded role, which allows him to get more ice time and more opportunities, and I thought here tonight was a good game, but like I said, it's never going to have that blow away, or is very rarely going to have that blow you away type of performance. When it comes to the third line, we have Hoffman, Sturm, and Bailey. So it is Mike Hoffman jumping up from the fourth to the third line to fill in for Kevin Labanc, who, as I mentioned, jumped up to the first line. And the player to talk about here on this third line is absolutely Justin Bailey. So after a couple of games ago, I talked about how Bailey had never really lived up to having been called up in that first game against the Washington Capitals and performing well there. Last game against Detroit, I talked about how he was very good offensively, but from a defensive standpoint, he struggled mightily. Here tonight, his defense was fine, and his offense continued to be very, very good. He was a driving force on this third line, making a lot of things happen, and he was actually rewarded by David Quinn near the end of the game, not only with some 6-on-5 opportunities, and he was a big part for why the Sharks were able to actually tie this game, but even got an overtime shift, which was quite nice to see. A very good game for number 90 as he continues to make a case to stick around with the San Jose Sharks once they do get more healthy bodies back into the lineup. When it comes to Mike Hoffman, obviously credit where credit is due. He did score a couple of goals here. Not exactly the most amazing sort of even strength, hard work type of goals. It was a nice one here for the game tying goal, but set up well by his teammates. And then the first goal that he scored was entirely luck based, barely even on the power play, and just goes off of a Golden Knights player in front. So not something that you can really give a ton of credit to Hoffman for. When it comes to his actual even strength play, he did definitely lag behind Justin Bailey, though that's not saying much because Bailey had a really, really good game. Generally, 2 goals. What more can you really hope for from Hoffman besides just a generally solid level of play, which was indeed hit? When it came to Nico Sturm, I also thought he played relatively well, bounced off of Justin Bailey decent enough, and was just generally the glue once more, holding this third line together. When it comes to the fourth line, we had Smith being the player to jump into the lineup in favor of William Eklund being injured, and so he joins Zadina and Jacob McDonald on this fourth line. This fourth line did have a couple of moments. Zadina had a good couple puck touches. McDonald actually had a very good chance to end the game in the overtime in the last few seconds, and also had a decent play. I believe it was in the second period where he almost came to score, but otherwise it's not as though this fourth line managed to make a ton happen, and they were okay. Then we have defensively the top pairing of Ferraro and Burrows. I actually thought this pairing was rather good. As I mentioned early on in this one, is that the Sharks outshot the Golden Knights by a pretty significant margin, which is very, very impressive for them being against such a very good team. And so that does sort of credit need to be going to a decent bit of the Sharks' defensive core. There were a couple of these goals where there was just a bit too much empty space available. For instance, the Braden McNabb goal is not one that you want to give up if you are this Sharks defensive unit, but generally I thought they played in the defensive zone pretty well, and this top pairing I thought was a big reason for that. Ferraro and Burrows, while not amazing, definitely held down the fort rather well. Then we have the second pairing of Addison and Thrun. And of course, the big spotlight, you could say, would be on Henry Thrun, called up from the Barracuda yesterday for tonight's game against the Golden Knights. And there was a bit of good and a bit of bad here in this game. In terms of good, I liked the aggressiveness in his game, willing to jump up into the play offensively. Got burned a couple of times while doing that. For instance, I believe it was early in the third period. He jumps up aggressively in the play, thinking Hertl will be able to get the cross ice pass to him, giving him a lot of space to work with. Hertl instead ends up sort of passing the puck off of a Golden Knights player. It deflects to the neutral zone, ends up being a 2-on-1 type of situation. Not something that I'm heavily blaming Thrun for, but it is the risk that you take in trying to pinch up in that situation. But there were multiple other moments where I thought Thrun was playing very aggressively, and not just the general oh, this is a safe pinch that works 100% of the time, but the sort of 50-50 type of plays that, if they work out, can be very beneficial for your team. So the fact that here in his first game back in a while in the NHL that he's willing to make that play was quite nice to see. I also enjoyed his physicality in the defensive zone, not willing or not shying away from throwing the body around, trying to push players off the puck, was really giving it to everybody who would hear it on the Golden Knights. So that was quite nice to see. From a bad perspective, there were moments in the defensive zone where it felt as though Thrun was kind of chasing the play a lot. It's not the end end of the world when you chase a specific player who has the puck, because that might be your man, but when you're chasing the puck itself, you're never really going to be able to catch up to it. It moves much faster than you can, and there were a couple of shifts where Thrun kind of gets turned around in circles trying to do exactly that, which caught him out of position in those shifts. So that was slightly rough, trying to overcompensate at times, which is something that not only young defensemen but many defensemen do in certain situations. And so generally I thought it was an all-around positive game for Thrun, a nice little call-up type of performance. We'll see if that manages to maintain a spot in the lineup, because honestly, I don't really want to see Vlasic back here. When it comes to his partner, we have Calen Addison, who definitely redeemed himself with the goal later on that made it 4-3 in the last few minutes of the third period, but was otherwise really struggling here tonight once more. He's just the type of player he's not really able to outmuscle players in front. He's a very small defenseman, and so as a small defenseman, you really want to excel at the offensive game, and technically that is what Calen Addison's scouting report would say about him. And there have been games this season where he's been really impressive in that area, and you say, wow, this guy could be a future sort of top 4 type of guy for the San Jose Sharks. But there have been more often games where he's just not able to make that impact offensively, and his defensive woes end up shining even more because of that. And it felt as though that was perhaps one of these games tonight. Like I mentioned, there was the goal. That's nice to see. But from a defensive standpoint, his work in his own zone, not fantastic. And then we have the third pairing. The player who actually stood out in this third pairing was actually Jan Ruda. I've been quite tough on Ruda for the majority of this season, where at best I've thought he's been mediocre. But here tonight was one of his best of the season. I thought he was working very, very well from a defensive standpoint at the very least. Offense, he continues to do literally nothing for San Jose, but that's not the end of the world, I guess you could say. You really want him to just be able to play strong defensively, and I thought he did that to a very, very acceptable level here tonight. Was one of the Sharks' better defensive defensemen on this game. And then his defensive partner, Okhotyuk, still some struggles for sure, while I'm continuing to appreciate the offensive instincts that he has been bringing, the physicality that he has been bringing. There are still those just boneheaded mistakes. There was one where he didn't seem to be aware with the puck that was right in front of him, overskates it and gives up a 2-on-1 the other way. So that was a bit awkward to see. And it's just generally been some growing pains in Okhotyuk's game thus far this season. Continues to get game after game. I guess David Quinn likes the aspects that he does bring, but it's not necessarily smooth sailing for this player. And then we have the goaltender Kaapo Kähkönen, who I thought was pretty good here tonight. Nothing amazing, as his personal win streak does come to an end with this shootout loss, but he was okay enough, not necessarily tasked with making a ton of big saves. There was perhaps a couple of these that you would maybe want to see him have, like the McNabb one perhaps, but not exactly the end of the world either. And that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Tuesday, where they will take on the Winnipeg Jets. They'll finally be back home after the 6-game road trip, which, based on their record this season, was definitely a success. They go over 500 hockey through this stretch of 6 games with good performances against really strong teams like the Rangers, like the Devils, perhaps like the Golden Knights, perhaps like the Devils and the Islanders, the Red Wings. These are not any slouches in the NHL, and they looked good enough to actually give us some competitive games. And while you may be hoping indeed once more that the Sharks will be losing more often than not, and with this loss in shootout, they do find themselves right at the bottom of the standings once more in a tie with Chicago, but because they have more games played, they are 32nd. It would be nice to see some of these competitive games, and that's exactly what the Sharks have been giving us as of late. Class dismissed.